Cornfields, one of the world's biggest sources of food, but much of the harvest ends up being expensively processed into fuel for gas-guzzling cars. Just one example of how the push for biofuels is going wrong, according to this government review.
The basic principle and policy at the time was probably okay. What has happened, unfortunately, it's developed unchecked in parts of the world where there have been unintended consequences. We need to recognise those and now put it right.
The report says biofuels can help fight climate change, but they're forcing up food prices. Oilseeds could go up 70% in some parts of the world by 2020, hitting the poorest hardest. In India alone, an extra 10 million people could be driven into poverty. And clearing forests and peatlands to grow biofuels could add far more greenhouse gas than could ever be saved. Our fuel tanks already contain a small percentage of biofuel, which is set to rise in the next few years. The review calls for a slowdown until proper controls are in place. And in Parliament today, the government agreed.
We do have a moral obligation to try and, as it were, weed out the impact of bad biofuels on food prices, but also potentially increasing overall CO2 emissions.
Some biofuels are seen as positive. Sugarcane in Brazil produces syrup, and the waste makes fuel as well. Future generations of biofuels should be more efficient. The challenge is what to do now. Our targets for biofuels are set within the European Union, so any change needs to be renegotiated. And America's farmers are enjoying massive subsidies to produce the fuel. Growers in Malaysia and Indonesia are making good money from it as well. So the government here may be backing down, but how much can it slow what's become a global biofuel juggernaut?
One of the challenges, though, is that when we did the early research in this area, we found that 90% of us just didn't realise we were throwing the food away. And I think that was sort of coming across in what we've just listened to, is we've sort of got ourselves into the habit of throwing food away. It's only when we actually get it really brought to our attention do we start doing something about it.
Seems a bit odd that you can't realise what you're putting in the bin.
Yeah, I think it is quite strange, but it's strange. 9 out of 10 of us just didn't realise. It was only when we got people to do diaries, or in fact if you do separate food waste collections, and actually see what you throw away. It was only at that time people think, oh yeah, actually I do. And it's interesting, when you go and actually do one-to-one with people or go into their houses and say, let's just talk about food waste, which we've been doing with people like the Women's Institute as part of Love Food, Hate Waste. You know, people really think, oh crikey, yes, I really am throwing a lot away, and it's costing me a lot of money. And people can save. It's staggering. It's 10 billion as a nation. If we just ate the food we could have eaten that we currently now throw away, it would save us £10 billion a year.
The problem is, it's a reflection, I suppose, of our convenient way of living. We've got used to doing a sort of big one-stop shop, having convenience foods in the fridge, thinking maybe I'll eat a few more vegetables and fruit this week than I actually will. At the end of the week, it's easier to throw them out than to actively think about changing your habits, isn't it?
Well, I think there's a lot in that. I think we have got out of the habit of just planning and preparing and storing our food. So what was the reasons why we're throwing all these food away? Well, there seem to be two coming out of the research that we've done. Two big ones. One is, not storing things so you get the optimal life. For example, apples will last a great deal longer in the fridge. Freezing things, for example. And the other thing is actually cooking more than we need. So getting the right portions right and just cooking exactly the amount of rice we need for 4 people rather than making a guess, and then not being able to use the leftovers that come out at the other side. So those two things coming together are real factors, and actually they're relatively simple things we can all do now, which will save money and reduce our impact on the environment.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking in personal terms, I suppose, to individuals, it will save you money. The message Gordon Brown is trying to get out there today is a much broader one, talking about the overall cost of food and saying if we're all more economical, there'll be less demand, prices will come down. But does that argument actually add up to much when you look at the other elements that are pushing up the price of food? Growing populations, climate change, fuel costs that are rising, which is increasing the cost of transporting food. I mean, how much of an issue is this in the overall cost of food?
Well, if you think about it, we're throwing away a third of what we buy. So that's equivalent to us going shopping, buying 3 bags of shopping and then putting one of those straight into the bin. That's got to have a significant effect on the amount of food that's available. It's got to have a significant effect on the prices that we're paying. And so therefore, it's not the only factor. Of course it's not. And you've just given a list of things that it's also to do with. The key thing is, it's something we can all do something about tomorrow, should we choose to do so. And there is help out there to show, to actually help us all do it. And let's be honest, we used to do this, and it's a question of getting back into that habit. As a society, we've done this.